Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate so much the many of you that join these webinars. I saw many of you at the conference, and your words and encouragement to continue to do these presentations. I really appreciate it, and I really want to thank everyone for doing that. If you are new and you don't join these regularly, my name is Anthony Velasquez. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at PharmaForce, where my role is to oversee the products and the technology. We are a pharmacy solutions provider in the healthcare space, where we provide technology solutions in the 340B space, PBM, and pharmacy management systems. So that's a little bit about us. And this webinar in particular has been something we've been doing for a couple of years now. And our goal is to provide you educational value with what's going on in the 340B market and the PBM market and some other topics that we pick. But the hot topic right now on everyone's mind is the rebate model and the huge announcement from HRSA of the pilot model that was announced on August 1st, 2025. So this was a moment that many of us were waiting. This was a moment that many of us were preparing for. This is an announcement that was, I would say, a bit unexpected, but after the settlement of the many legal battles that were between pharma and HRSA, of whether HRSA had the authority to stop pharma from doing something like this, and there was a recent win from HRSA, then this was sort of inevitable to happen. So here we are. And I can tell you from talking to many of you at the conference in July, that's the reason why we didn't have a webinar in July, because many of you, like us, were at the conference, at the 340B Summer Conference in Maryland. But I can tell you that this is the topic on everyone's mind, is how are we going to prepare for this? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my 340B program? How much is this going to impact my 340B savings? And many, many, many more questions. So my goal for the next 30, 45 minutes is to help answer a lot of those questions. I can tell you, and I can give you sort of the punchline right up front. No one has all the answers. And I just want to be clear about that. No one has all the answers yet as to the exact way that this is going to roll out, but I think I have some really good information for you today. So let me go ahead and get into the agenda. Let me do my normal disclosure that I do all the time. This information, this presentation is including any analysis or opinions, represent only the personal views of the presenter. These perspectives do not necessarily align with the official stance of PharmaForce or its affiliates. This content is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, financial, or professional advice. Please keep that in mind. Everything that I'm going to say is informational. It is based on public information that I have studied and read and prepared to share with you all today. All right, so here we are. Let's look at the agenda for today. So number one, we're going to just do a refresher on the Inflation Reduction Act, the timeline. We're going to talk about the rebate model. What is this? What does it mean? We're going to talk about the pilot program and that, because that is huge news that recently has come out. And I think providers are still digesting of what does this mean? What does this mean for the future? We're going to break down the 2024 rebate models that manufacturers were proposing versus this pilot model. Like what's the pros and cons? How do they compare to each other? We're going to assess the program impact. And number one, I'm going to give you some tips to be prepared to keep you sort of ahead of the ball and make sure that you are ready for this and you're ready to tackle this. The way I like to see things like this is the 340B program is a critical program to the entire healthcare system of this country. It is a safety net program that helps providers keep their doors open, provide patients with the care that they need, and help millions and millions and millions of patients get the prescriptions they need. So whenever things like this show up, I think the right approach and the right perspective is to say, this is a new challenge. We just have to figure out a way how to navigate it and deal with what we have in front of us. So that is my goal today. So with that being said, before we get into the details of the pilot model, I just want to rewind just a little bit and talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. This was a major legislation that was passed under the previous administration. And essentially, what it did was it gave Medicare the ability to negotiate prices on very expensive products and sort of use this maximum fair price that Medicare will pay based on negotiated pricing with manufacturers to pay less for these medications. And there's some criteria for the medications that were selected and things like that. And there's some penalties and taxes for manufacturers that don't comply with the Inflation Reduction Act. So the manufacturers have very big incentives to make sure that this is complied with. And there's the way that it's positioned is that there's benefit for patients and patients receive reduced costs and things like that. But it has major implications on the 340B program and how the program works. And that is where you and I are here today discussing this because it affects the many of you that are interested in this topic. We actually, this topic has been so popular. It's been our second most attended topic in terms of registrations. And it actually exceeded the number of licenses that we had in our Zoom subscription. So we were worried that some of you were not able to make it. So those of you that have made it, again, thank you for coming. So the timeline is this, just at a high level. The first 10 Part D drugs were named for negotiation, and then CMS was to announce the maximum fair price for those drugs, and then that starts in 2026. So January of 2026 is going to be I would say, chaotic month of entities trying to figure out how to adapt, manufacturers trying to figure out how to adapt with this, and sort of preparing the market for a potential shift in how 340B operates that will go into the future. And there will be more drugs that will be added in 2027, 2028, and beyond. So here are the 10. Here are the 10 drugs that we are talking about that are part of this first batch of negotiations. As you can see, some of these are, what we will call, maintenance meds that will be given in the context of a patient, receiving primary care, like insulins, like a Januvia and things like that. But there's also some high dollar stuff like an Enbrel, a Jardiance, a Stelara, an Imbruvica, and these other really high dollar products. This is straight from CMS. I have the source right at the, but this is straight from CMS. You can find this online. But as you can see, in the fourth column, the negotiated price for a 30-day supply for calendar year 2026 is on Januvia a 79% discount from calendar year 2023 list price. As you can see, some of the others, the discounts are even greater, 76% on Novolog and other of Novo Nordisk products, 68% on Farxiga and some others. So as you can see, the drop is massive in some of these. Now, you might be asking the question of, well, okay, what does that mean for 340B? I think the answer is, in the most basic terms, is there will be some entities that will be impacted by this in the sense that you might still be able to capture these at 340B because the 340B price is going to be less than the maximum fair price. However, the discount of the reimbursement of the maximum fair price will still leave entities with a significant reduction in savings. So it is not a situation where you get the calendar year 2023 reimbursement and the 340B pricing anymore. So I just want to clarify that because there have been many, many, many conversations where I have had where there's been a lot of confusions about this. The sort of general expectation is that on December 31st, 2025, a Januvia 30-day supply will reimburse at $527, and that on January 1st, 2026, that maximum fair price will be what is adjudicated through the pharmacy's PBM. Will that happen that way? Will that get delayed? We don't know. No one knows the answer to that. But that is the general expectation of this, which, if that is the case and that reimbursement is what is returning the switch data at the pharmacy, that will have implications for your 340B program, for dispensing fees, for everything else that will come out of that. So these are the 10 products. If you are a covered entity and you have specialty agreements that have some of these products on here, these are things for you to focus on to assess the financial impact. And I got some tips for you close to the end on how to do that. But this is what we're talking about. This is the scope of the changes that will be coming in 2026 for covered entities. All right, moving on to the next thing. So in a response to all of that, right, what has come out of the Inflation Reduction Act in this is that, all right, well, this means that 340B has to change. No longer can manufacturers provide the discounts upfront on a 340B account. There now needs to be this rebate model where entities are forced to pay for the wholesale acquisition costs upfront and then submit for a rebate to a third-party vendor of the manufacturer, and then receive a rebate that's equivalent to the difference of the wholesale acquisition cost and the 340B price. So that is where this whole rebate model thing came up. It did not come up, or the genesis of it was not the August 1st letter from HRSA. It actually has been proposed back several years ago and has been attempted to be implemented for several years. Those of you that have been in the 340B program would know this. Now, at its basic, not to spend too much time on this because this is not necessarily we want to talk about the HRSA model because that's what we have to consider. But at a basic is what I said, covered entities buy the drugs at wholesale acquisition and then receives a rebate that's equal to the difference. That fundamentally changes the way that 340B operates, where today you have that 340B pricing loaded on your 340B account with a Public Health Services Act pricing catalog loaded. You can buy that at 340B, and then you provide documentation or you accumulate, on eligible drugs and things like that. The scope of the rebate model is understood to be on these Medicare negotiated drugs, but there have been words that can be extended to more. We've already seen with the rebate model, which I don't want to jump ahead, but that now not just Medicare claims are required, but all claims are required. So, the scope is fuzzy on this, on where it will land eventually. And there's a lot of concerns about that from providers based on some of the language in that letter from HRSA. And then the oversight, it's basically rebates are processed within 10 to 14 days is what has been the general proposal for some of these some of these models that have come out. And there's concerns about the manufacturing compliance and rejections. Essentially, when the first rebate models came out, the biggest concern that providers had was who's going to oversee this? Who's going to have the oversight to make sure that claims are not constantly rejected for whatever reason that the third-party platforms are choosing or deciding at the direction of the manufacturers, right? And there was unfortunately a trust factor, and that this would become the beginning to what we have with the contract pharmacy restrictions, right? Where it started very small, very limited, certain drugs, certain entity types, and then it's continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's the rebate model. Now that you understand that, so picture this in your head. This rebate model is what has been discussed for years in the 340B program. To now we get to this, which is the HRSA rebate pilot program. Now this is HRSA after winning a case where they were able to shoot down the proposals from several manufacturers, including Johnson & Johnson in late 2024, and others that were basically aiming of bringing in this rebate model into the 340B program without HRSA's approval. There was, many different reports of some manufacturers that submitted or informed HRSA they were going to do this, and HRSA denied it. Some went ahead and started publishing, this is what we're going to do. And they had a third-party platform, and we met with those third-party platforms as TPAs, and we had meetings with them, and we were told this is what's going to happen. This is what you have to provide. This is how it's going to work. And then HRSA came and said, hey, you can't do that. You need to stop that, and took that back. And then there were lawsuits and things like that. Now, the HRSA rebate pilot model is sort of the the legit option solution, according to the Health Resources and Services Administration, that entities have to recoup these savings. So its goal, and its purpose is to address the conflict between the maximum fair price and 340B. So the manufacturer will not provide both, will not provide MFP and 340B pricing on the same product. It's a voluntary participation from manufacturers, which is interesting when I read that language, because I'm thinking, well, what options do you have if you don't volunteer to do this and you're one of the 10? I don't know what other options exist for a manufacturer in order to comply with this. And the interesting is there's a 1 year minimum participation. So manufacturers have to commit to this for a year, and then HRSA is going to review it. The process remains the same as what we talked about, where the CE pays a full price ahead, and then the manufacturers rebate the difference to the 340B ceiling price. So the original rebate model that we talked about in 2024 and have been in talks for many years, the pilot program sort of confirms that similar process where entities have to pay the wholesale acquisition up front for those products. Okay, there are eligibilities, there's requirements, there's criteria for this pilot program. I'm going to get into the weeds on all of those. So number one is this applies to those 10 products. Now, it does say it may apply to more drugs in the future. That is concerning. It does say that in the notice that HRSA put out. One of the things that's concerning too is that all payer types are included in this, not just Medicare prescriptions. So that's worrisome as well, because it gets you into a place where now you're submitting for essentially cash card claims. You're now submitting claims to this third-party vendor for a rebate because you're losing the 340B pricing completely on your 340B account. So and only for manufacturers CMS 2026 agreements. Now some of the requirements, which I'll get more into details, is they have to use a secure platform. It has to be manufacturer funded. In other words, the cost of this platform, they cannot charge you a fee and say, well, in order for you to participate, covered entity, you have to pay this fee. The rebates are issued within 10 days. I have my questions on that. What if it's not? What are they going to do? What is anyone? I guess you can go to HRSA and they outline that there'll be a process where there'll be some oversight, and the CE submit claims within 45 days. That's similar to what CEs are used to with the ESP platform if you are submitting to that. Now, the one really, really, really good thing about the pilot program that I really like and I think was a really good change was that HRSA added in there that no rebate denials for diversion or duplicate discounts are allowed. So in other words, the manufacturer cannot add logic to say, I'm going to deny that rebate on that claim because of concerns of diversion or duplicate discounts. And those disputes have to be handled via HRSA through manufacturer audits and the mechanisms that exist today for manufacturers that have those concerns. So I think this is a huge, huge protection because the models, which I'm going to show you in the comparison in 2024, had manufacturers adding their own qualification logic. So we went from a potential world where you as a covered entity have your own third-party administrator, you have your own configurations, you have your own patient eligibility logic, and then a third-party vendor for a manufacturer could then decide that that prescription did not meet eligibility and had a whole host of, I think it was like 15 or 16 rules. So they were checking for, and they were asking for encounters, and they were asking for all sorts of data to do that, which was very, very, very concerning. And at the time I raised that alarm, I did a webinar on that was very concerning if that is the route that HRSA would allow manufacturers to go. So there are some things that are not good, in my opinion, my personal opinion about the pilot program. But there are some things that are good, and this protection is very, very, very good. So with that being said, here are some of the more details of the criteria at the end of the notice. If you haven't seen it, maybe we could post it in the chat, but at the end of the notice, there is this sort of, hey, here are the criteria that you have to meet And I've condensed some of them because some of them are spelled out, very deep in much detail. But essentially, the plan must ensure manufacturers cover all the data submission costs. So I mentioned that they can't charge for this to entities. They can't pass on any fees for this. Number two, it maintains the existing distribution channel. So you will still be able to keep your 340B account, but that account will be loaded with a non 340B pricing now. Number three, there's includes a technical support um, uh, criteria where manufacturers have to provide a mechanism for entities to engage about questions related to denials, related to the process, related to data. So that I think that's an important component. Those of you that have dealt with the 340B ESP process know that that can be a cumbersome and complex process to manage. So I'm appreciative that HRSA included that, and I think we all should be appreciative that that was included as a requirement because you can go back and say, hey, you're violating the pilot if you're not providing a technical support. The data submission window of 45 days, we talked about that. There's language of flexibility with some exemptions and things like that that are sounds like they can be negotiated and work with the manufacturer directly, but we will see what that looks like in practice. The IT platform should filter for rebate relevant data and provide real-time claim reports. Um, I'm curious why they added that. What I would say to you as a covered entity, do not provide more data than you need to in this. There are a certain data specs of fields that are requested for certain claims, and I don't think that any entity should provide more data than is necessary through this process. Again, that is my opinion. I think that protects the patient's data, it protects your data and those sorts of things. So the rebate processing compliance, so the manufacturers have to specify the rebate level, whether it's at a unit or a package level. They have to pay or deny within 10 days. The big one that I mentioned, rebates can't be denied based on diversion or duplicate discounts. And they have to provide reporting. That's a really big one, right? If we were in a world where your claims are going to get denied for a rebate and you don't know why and you don't have a path or a mechanism to dispute that, that would not be good. So those are some of the details of the criteria of the manufacturers have to now submit a plan. So here's the pilot timeline. So August 1st, that happened. The notice came out. There's actually a comment period. To be completely honest, the comment period doesn't seem like it's going to change anything. I was hopeful that the comment period may do something. I still encourage you to submit a comment. If you're a covered entity, if you're a pharmacy, I think you should submit a comment on this. Maybe align with your advocacy group on what to say with that. But it sounds to me, the perception is that this is full steam ahead. I know there have been certain reports of calls to delay this to give entities more time. But comments are due. I want to say it's by September 1st, comments are due. Manufacturer submissions are due by September the 15th. HRSA will approve by October the 15th, as long as it meets that criteria that I mentioned the previous slide. And then the pilot launches January 1st, and then there will be a 1 year evaluation period, is the way that it's been stated in the notice from HRSA. So really, really interesting stuff. New territory for covered entities. 340B has certainly changed a lot in the last couple of years. I started 340B, my first 340B program in 2011, 2012. And I've seen my share of, changes throughout the time. There was a time where it was pretty status quo, and then you saw a lot of changes. So this is really a really interesting time to navigate. Um, One of the things that I wanted to do that I thought was really, really interesting was to compare these two just from a really interesting perspective is to compare the 2024 model to the HRSA pilot model. So the mechanism of the pricing or the mechanism of receiving the 340B pricing is so it's similar. The original 2024 manufacturer model had 14 days to pay. This one is 10. The scope was that it was CMS claims only. where this HRSA pilot model is the 10 drugs, but all payers, so all claims for those 10 drugs. And the some of the original models were all Medicare claims, and not just the 10 drugs. So it expanded further. Um, the participation was voluntary for CEs, and the HRSA pilot model is voluntary for manufacturers. Again, I don't know the answer to the question of if a manufacturer doesn't participate and doesn't volunteer to do this, what does that mean for them? I don't know the answer to that. From an oversight perspective, the 2024 model was manufacturer-led with minimal oversight, and that's why they had massive data specs. Like there were data specs where they were asking like 4 or 5 different data sets and split billing transactions and encounters and historical encounters and a bunch of stuff. But this is HRSA administered with proper oversight that I think allows provider to feel a little bit more comfortable with this. The transparency in the first one was not considered, a process that will be transparent to providers. This one requires reporting and public input, so it feels like there's more transparency here. The data needs, as I shared, was extensive on the first one. This is limited to claims data. This is limited to 11 fields that have been identified in the rebate pilot. And the big one, from a compliance perspective, pricing can be denied on manufacturer terms in the 2024 models. And again, they were so different. There were several models, so I'm making general statements here. And then in the pilot model now from HRSA, manufacturers cannot deny those claims based on diversion and duplicate discounts. I saw 2 hands went up. I will take questions at the end and input. So please keep your hands raised, and I will take questions at the end. All right. So now assessing the impact. Let's talk about the impact to your program. So here's the way that I like to think about it. I like to think about it in sort of like from a macro to micro level, right? If if you don't have contract pharmacies, for example, very few covered entities fall into that, or even in-house pharmacy, then you're not going to see any impact here. But if you are in a state that has no access bill, in other words, some of these products are already being blocked in your state. I can think of Michigan, I can think of Florida. There's a couple of states out there. Um, if you're already in a state that has no contract pharmacy access bill, then you might have a smaller financial impact in reduction of savings because those claims are being excluded already. It may be limited to your in-house pharmacies are impacted, maybe your designated pharmacy is impacted. My point is that there is that's the funnel that I like to look at it is the manufacturer restrictions are sort of a secondary outflow of this. If your state has an access bill, then the effect could be broader to you and your covered entity. So, I'm going to give you a tip on how to pull this data and how to access the data. But again, the one part that I don't like is that you're going to have to send claims now for cash cards, private commercial, Medicaid, Medicare. All of it now needs to be submitted to the manufacturers. So there's some of that is concerning to covered entities. I think should be concerning. There's some operational challenges, and that is number one, there is an added administrative workload with this. Similar to, I've spoken to many of you that are telling me, hey, 340B ESP submission takes me at least 20 hours a week to manage. Additional hours, you need additional resources, you need, many of you are hiring consultants and firms and using our services in order to do that, just because the additional workload and burden on your 340B program. So that is clear. That is clear that this will come with additional operational challenges. And I'm not even talking about just submitting the claims, it's the work after. I didn't get the rebate. The rebate got denied. It's all of the above that will that will be impacted to your current program operations. Now, there are questions. There are questions, like I said, I don't have all the answers. And there are many, many questions to this. Some of the questions that you're sort of asking yourself right now is, okay, well, who's going to submit the claims? The TPA is going to do it on your behalf? Is the covered entity going to have to do it? Is it going to be it depends on my TPA's capability, which you should be having those conversations now with your TPA. One of the things that we're thinking, this is a tip for all of you. This is me providing you with added value of a process. One of the processes that we're thinking is, will the models that come out allow for a hold period for those claims? In other words, could you capture the claim, not place an order for those claims, submit the rebate, and then if the rebate is approved, then you order the claim at the wholesale acquisition cost? Is that allowable? If it is, that's our plan. And that is the plan that we're going to help our covered entities do. How do you manage rejections is another operational challenge that you as a covered entity will have to figure out. How do you manage rejections with our process? If we have to reverse a claim, how do we do that? Who do we contact? What is the process that we're going to have to go through? So you're going to see very quickly that those questions will become more and more real as entities prepare for this. And we're in August. We're just a couple of months away. We're awaiting a lot of things that we yet do not know. We yet do not know. And with that, here is getting to the end here. There are things that we know about this. We know that, HRSA is going to oversee and approve all the rebate models. These models now have to be submitted. There has to be a proposal submitted to HRSA. They've even capped the number of pages. No offense to the lawyers out there, but they know these are going to be written by lawyers, so they cap the number of pages that you can submit. There's a 1-year review period. It's limited to the 10 drugs that I mentioned, and it's a limited data set. Those are things that we know based on what the pilot tells us. There's a lot of unknowns. Will the stakeholder comments change anything? Will stakeholders put the pressure on HRSA to either delay this or to reconsider? And I think the opinions are mixed on that, because there's the reality of complying with the Inflation Reduction Act, and then you have the rebate model, which seems to be the only option on the table, although there are other options on the table, but the rebate model seems to be the one that has steam. Will manufacturers participate? Will they participate to this? Will they submit a plan by September the 15th? We don't know. What if HRSA denies the plan of a manufacturer because they're trying to go beyond the criteria? The really big one that I have is, how many IT vendors will be in this space now? How many will TPAs have to interface with, or will entities now, you're going to be dealing with 340B ESP, potentially Beacon, potentially Carderos, potentially another platform to manage your 340B program, adding complexity, adding more work, adding more challenges and barriers to access 340B savings. So that is a really big question that, again, no one knows. We have had some of those vendors reach out to us as a TPA just to start conversations, but no, everything is pending on HRSA approving a manufacturer's submission. The other thing is, will rebates remain limited to these products? Every person that I talked to at the conference, and the day that letter went out, I was on my way to the beach with my wife and kids, and I was getting text messages and emails of people concerned of, man, did you see that? Did you see the pilot announcement? Did you, what do you think? Or you think it's going to stay at these products? Is it going to expand? Is this going to be a new 340B? I don't know the answer to all of those things, but I know that entities have those questions, and those things will come out over the next few months. Now, for you to be prepared, what can you do? What can you do right now, right away? Number one is to review your program impact. I think all of you should do that. Work with your TPA to do that. We're doing that. We're pulling that data and reviewing, whether it's 90 days, whether it's 6 months, whatever you want, but focus on all prescriptions or NDCs associated with those 10 that I mentioned, and look at the impact. Have an impact of like, what if if it was zero, here's what our impact will be, to our 340B savings. If we only capture 20%, here's what the impact will be. If we only capture 40%, here's what the impact will be. That I think is the number one thing that you should do right away, and have that and present it to your compliance committee, talk about it internally. Check with your TPA for support. What is your TPA doing? This is a world where providers need TPAs that are nimble and able to adapt and able to move quickly, because this stuff is coming quickly. And there will be these IT platforms, and there will be these new interfaces, and there will be this new world of submitting claims. So you want to start having that conversation with your TPA now. You got to talk to your pharmacies, coordinate with your pharmacies. What does this mean? What is their understanding of this? Are there drugs that the MFP is less, and how to handle that? Those are all conversations that you should be having, and have those conversations with your chain pharmacy partners, and what are they doing? I can assure you, talking to a lot of them, they have questions too, and they might not have those answers as we wait for more clarity. But those are the questions those are the things that you can be having now, is just to start those conversations, assess your resources and see like what is your option for identifying if you are highly impacted. You're going to need someone to lead this effort to help sort of coordinate process files, submit claims, monitor denials, etc. Set it up so that you get payment, confirm you're getting payment, confirm that the money's in your bank account, right? All those things need to happen. Create SOPs. I think it's really important to start documenting what a process will look like, and start having those conversations. Again, you might not have that necessarily now. You're kind of putting that all together, but because of the complexity of this, it's very encouraged for you to have a standard operating procedure on how to handle this, and ultimately educate your teams. You coming here and getting educated on this and knowing what's going on in the market is a really important step in order to be prepared for this. I think the most important step in order to be prepared for this is, you don't want to be a covered entity where this happens and this is kind of going on and your 340B program is significantly impacted and you weren't ready for it. So I appreciate you all joining today and educating yourselves and caring about what this looks like for your 340B program and the impact that this will have to your 340B program. Places to follow us. Here's how you get in touch if you want to know a little bit more about us or what we do, what we offer, what we provide. You can email us at info@thepharmaforce.com. There's our phone number. There's a conference coming up that we're going to be at where you can schedule a 15-minute chat with Erin. She's wonderful. She's great. She will help you figure out ways to find opportunities to grow your program and things like that, to make sure you're optimized. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you joining. I hope that this was a productive and valuable information. Thank you for joining, and I look forward to the next webinar with you. Thank you. Bye.